I did the Rampage Rally challenge, and I spent most of my time sculpting the car. It wasn't the smartest move on a deadline. I had this weird idea that stuck in my head, kind of like a Baroque speedster that crashed through a rose window inside of a cathedral. Let me show you how I built it. What I learned, a little hack that saved the entire crash. So to start, I generated a ton of AI images, and I really just went with the one that clicked the most, and it was really nice because it was like this sort of Baroque speedster that was really interesting but also really weird. And so I tried the panel first modeling trick, and that didn't really work out for me. I don't know, it was like putting the panels on like the base mesh just like didn't sit well for me, and like so it just took a long time, like 3 hours, and ultimately I just didn't even go with it. Although that led to something really cool, because with that base mesh I was able to like actually sculpt something out, and sculpting took no time at all and was actually fun. Once I got that base mesh down though, I started kitbashing, and that was kind of one part because I knew that I couldn't sculpt the rest of it, but also a second part because I knew I had all these kitbash elements that could look nice if I used them in an interesting way. I also did this really interesting thing with the front axle where I used kitbash elements but just tied them to the wheels using a hook modifier and some constraints, and it probably would have been easier to rig it, but ultimately unfortunately you can't see that at all in the actual render, so that was pretty cool. It was nice though, like actually like setting out to do something kind of over the top and wacky, but you know, just again for my own sake. So from there I blocked out the environment, and I really wanted it to be obviously in a cathedral, and so that was really cool. Just having like these big sprawling open like columns and big flying buttresses and everything all over the place. I laid in some church pews, which the car inevitably hit, and I thought that was like just a little nice detail to like showcase that these aren't just props, they're like actually in the way of the car and like interacting with the car. And I feel like it's little details like that that really make the best ones stand out anyway. From there though, I threw a ton of cool volumetrics into the scene. I ended up using 2, and I used a God Ray as well, which I have a free pack of God Rays if you're interested, where I have both like projections that kind of make the God Rays look a little bit more interesting. It's sort of like a gobo almost, where the light itself is textured, but the God Ray itself is like textured inside of the volume. So definitely check that out on Gumroad if you're interested. And obviously the link is in the description. So once I had everything blocked out and a good feel for all the pieces of the church, I then started working on the actual like rose window crash. This was supposed to be pretty easy, but it ended up also taking a ton of time. I found a scan which wasn't great poly-wise, and then Blender surprise, of course, the annotation pencil guides did not work for cell fracture add-on. And as you know, the annotation pencil basically makes a cell fracture add-on look realistic. So I really needed that to work. Ultimately, I found a workaround on Reddit, of course, that you can use child vertices on a object to actually fracture it. So what I did was I just created a curve off of the annotation pencil that I drew, and that curve was able to turn into a mesh, so it had vertices, and then the cell fracture could use the vertices of the child to actually create the fracture from. It took just about like 25 tries, honestly, to like get this whole thing to work, but obviously it was worth it because ultimately it was a nice shot and I really wanted it to happen, and there really wasn't a workaround. It was either this or I just don't finish, so I really wanted to make this work. So even though the cell fracture add-on worked with the scan of the rose window, I still had to then use rigid body sim, and that was also a pain and a half, probably another 25-30 tries on figuring this out. And ultimately what I ended up doing is just making the car or making the rigid body sim start like maybe 3 frames earlier than it should have, and that kind of helped it not spaz out, but also didn't give it too much time to like overload the system. And of course, the glass pieces are just like falling into the mirror lake, unrealistic, but you know, it's pretty poetic and it makes sense for the style that I was going for. So again, honestly, what worked, what didn't, sculpting instead of like trying to model everything, definitely the way to go. And if you have kitbash materials, it's still pretty solid if you can make everything look cohesive. And then obviously the curve for the vertex child cell fracture is definitely the way to go. I would try to check that out if the annotation pencil isn't working for you. What didn't work, obviously, is I spent way too much time on the car, like almost like probably 10 out of like the 15 hours I spent in total on this thing. And probably definitely should have like locked in the timing as well too on the whole animation, because the mirror lake looks nice, but it could have a lot of improvement. And as far as like the story's concerned, you know, like why is this chariot running out of the church? You know, it doesn't really make a ton of sense. So like that could have added a lot of a big element to it. If you want to dig deeper, I'm posting all this on Patreon. Everything will be up on there. Also, if you are trying to make a living with Blender, I have a guide as well online that you can check out. It's on sale right now, so the link is in the description for that. All in all, I didn't really make the top 100, but I'm still really proud of this one. If this breakdown helped, you know, give it a like, and definitely check out the links in the description and let me know in the comments.